Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We are back again. And today, Stuart and I are joined by our friend, the great Jim Acosta, star of Substack, like few others lately, of really breaking out into this new news space that we're all occupying right now. So first off, I want to thank you, Jim, for coming on today. Stuart, thank you also. Guys, the Epstein story is not getting any better. It looks to me, as an experienced amateur at Trump analysis, that it is still riding in his head. He can't change the subject. Even this trip to Scotland and these trade deals have not pulled him and the news media off of the story from hell. So I want to start with you, Jim.
Yeah.
Talk to us about where you see, Trump's the week ahead for Trump, because it does not seem to be improving.
No, and it sort of reminds me of that character in The Princess Bride, Miracle Max, when he said he's not dead, he's only mostly dead. Trump isn't fucked, but he's mostly fucked right now when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein. And, when he's admitting on Air Force One, Jeffrey Epstein stole employees from my club. And then he's asked, was one of those employees, Virginia Giuffre, who committed suicide in April, was one of Epstein's victims. He acknowledged that young girl worked at his spa, and it raises all sorts of questions because Trump was talking about Epstein stealing multiple employees, and Jeffrey Epstein wasn't running a hotel. He wasn't running a restaurant. He wasn't stealing folks at the front desk or landscapers, or he wanted young girls for this pedophile sex ring, and it was really like a Ponzi scheme. The girls would recruit other girls who would recruit other girls, and it was just a heinous operation they had going on down there. And it just begs the question, what the hell did Donald Trump know about all of this? And how is it we're just hearing some of this stuff now? It's kind of remarkable.
And if he was just poaching spa employees, are you telling me Donald Trump never said, Jeffrey, what the F are you doing poaching my spa employees?
Right.
That seems weird. We've got a clip ready to go on this. Let's play this, folks. This if this doesn't blow your mind, I don't know what will.
Have you socialized with him?
Yes, sir.
Yes?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever socialized with Donald Trump in the presence of females under the age of 18?
Though I'd like to answer that question, at least today, I'm going to have to assert my 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment rights, sir.
Stuart, what do you think he was trying to communicate there?
Well,
I mean aside from the obvious.
Most of us can say no to that. It doesn't require constitutional protection. Have you ever socialized with Donald Trump and young girls under the age of 18? The answer, the only reason Trump was right, we have a clip here somewhere where Trump says, if you plead the 5th, you're guilty.
Persons that include Virginia Giuffre?
I don't know. I think she worked at the spa. I think so. I think that was one of the people. Yeah. He stole her. And by the way, she had no complaints about us, as you know. None whatsoever.
Yeah, so
I think she actually did have complaints about Donald Trump as time went on. As you know.
Set that up, Rick, that the people understand who she is. And
so Virginia Giuffre was a young lady who had worked in Trump's spa at Mar-a-Lago, who got drawn into the Epstein organization. She and her brother both worked there. And her brother is still alive. I'd love to have him come on the show. If he's interested, we'd love to talk to him. But they both worked at Mar-a-Lago, and Epstein, who was a frequent guest at Mar-a-Lago, lured her into his ring. He and Ghislaine lured her into this ring. She claims that he was, and there are photographs of it, of her, that Epstein used her sexually and then provided her to other men and to Ghislaine Maxwell sexually. And of course, her life ended tragically this April, a combination of, stress and depression and PTSD, whatever it was, that led to her suicide this April, which it is interesting to me that Donald Trump suddenly knows who she is. Suddenly, after all this discussion, all this time, she suddenly pops up. His great deep concern for the victims of child trafficking and human trafficking suddenly emerges now when he's under the gun. Jim, I mean,
Yeah.
isn't that sense that I think a lot of reporters I've spoken to in the last 2 weeks, 10 days, of Trump really flailing on this and really trying to, throwing everything at the wall. It's just not working for him.
It's not working for him. And there are so many questions about this, Rick. I mean, one is, according to the Wall Street Journal, Pam Bondi told him about this, that he was in the Epstein files back in May.
Yeah.
And then they tried to put this bullshit memo out, around 4th of July weekend. It was at the tail end of 4th of July weekend where they said, oh, nothing to see here, please disperse. And which means that Donald Trump has had some knowledge of this for some time. I mean, there's video of him being asked, were you told that you were in there? And he's, and he just sort of does a word salad answer.
It was a brief discussion.
A brief discussion. And so he's been throwing out Rosie O'Donnell. He's been throwing out Barack Obama treason, the Washington commanders. I mean, you name it. He's almost revealed where Jimmy Hoffa is buried. I mean, this is the level that he's gone to in all of this, and nothing works. And the reason why he is so desperate to get out of this mess is because, I mean, there's a key part of his base. I wrote about this on my Substack. Key part of his base, the QAnon cult, you could write them off as a bunch of lunatics and so on. They show up at his rallies. They fuel the MAGA base. And you're telling me that Donald Trump is actually contemplating pardoning Ghislaine Maxwell, a convicted sex trafficker, when QAnon, the conspiracy theory at the heart of QAnon is that he is going to vanquish the cabal of sex traffickers. I mean, to me, you can't make this shit up. And so, it's no wonder, Joe Rogan is saying this is a line in the sand and so on. It is astounding to me, but it's a trap of his own making that he's gotten himself caught in.
Yeah. Stuart, I want
to jump in about Maxwell.
Yeah, please.
I think, I suppose if you hang out with Jeffrey Epstein, you could say, well, I'm not as bad as Jeffrey Epstein. But when you listen to these these women now who were girls, they were children, who were victimized, they say that Maxwell was worse than Epstein, that she was more calculating, more of a predator, that Epstein was more a recipient of who she was entrapping. And if you just think about it, the vulnerability of these young girls, you have this woman who, has a little pixie dust of British aristocracy around her, very well spoken, sort of elegant. Let me introduce you to a world that otherwise you would have no entry to. And apparently one of the first steps of entry is to have sex with her.
Right.
And, they talk about they use the word monster. And I was seeing an interview with one of the victims, and she was saying, this person will just repeat again and repeat again. You cannot get a person like this to change. And this is who the President of the United States, personal criminal lawyer, who now just unbelievably is in the Justice Department. Yeah. I mean, I kind of missed the days when we had presidents who appointed people to the Justice Department who were not their criminal lawyers. But the guy gets on a plane and he flies down to Florida to have this tete-a-tete with this predator. And clearly they're setting up some sort of, trying to set up some sort of justification for pardoning her.
Right.
If you dip your toe into social media on this, you'll have a response from some of these people saying, well, if she can give us 20 predators, don't you think she should be pardoned?
The other thing, Rick, just to point out very quickly, when Trump says, oh, Epstein was stealing employees from me, he stole Virginia Giuffre, it was Ghislaine Maxwell who was involved in all of that too. It wasn't Epstein, giving these girls a ride. It was Ghislaine Maxwell who was facilitating this. She was a part of this Ponzi scheme.
In a video before she died, she said, Epstein was Pinocchio. Virginia Giuffre said Epstein was Pinocchio, and she, Ghislaine Maxwell, was Geppetto. She was the one pulling the strings. She had his money. He had her contacts. And so, this idea. If the MAGA folks are all about saving the children, and we have a guy in the form of Todd Blanche who was down there offering her immunity, bringing her a gift basket, talking to her about whatever shady deal is being made. I mean, I want to ask both of you about this. We are in the middle of the most obvious and clumsy government cover-up. I mean, Watergate looked professional in comparison to this, and Watergate was a mess. I want to ask both of you, like, where do you see, I'll start with you, Stuart, where do you see this cover-up? I mean, it cannot sustain itself. It is broken. There's a corrupt deal in place. He's almost daring America right now.
Well, Jim was writing about this. I think you've written about it as well. And I was talking to Jim about it. Like all these cover-ups, it started with sort of a relatively small number of people. And the more that Trump tries to use the arms of the government to be involved in this cover-up, the deeper it goes.
Right.
I mean, this has just infested the Justice Department. Not just the top. I mean, it's really very deep in the Justice Department. And you have the Speaker of the House, that sad little character from Shreveport, is refusing to say whether or not Maxwell should be given a pardon.
Right.
So
one day he'll be a real boy someday, perhaps. But anyway.
with Watergate, you could say that the cover-up was worse. I don't think the cover-up is worse. I don't know what is worse than child sex trafficking.
Right. I mean, petty burglary, in Watergate, and the cover-up in Watergate pales in comparison. There are human victims in this. I mean, and folks, I think I was reflecting on this last night. The piece I wrote this morning started to touch on, I don't think we've paid enough attention to the victims in this. I think the criminals are so flamboyant and horrible, Maxwell and Epstein, that the victims are sort of getting put in the shade a little bit on this, because it's so the victims are so operatic, or the villains are so operatic, that the victims are fading away. And I think that's one of the things here that some folks in the MAGA movement of relative goodwill are feeling concerns about. I think they are starting to look at this and go, over 200 women were trafficked by Ghislaine Maxwell, and Trump's going to pardon her. I think there are some fractures inside that world, in the MAGA world right now, which is rare. But Jim, talk to us about your thoughts on the cover-up process here, because I also think it's lighting up the media finally to go, oh, this is real. Yeah,
and it took a few days, but it might be that Trump is dangling this pardon over Ghislaine Maxwell's head for the purposes of shutting her up temporarily.
Right.
And so who knows, we may see this now. We may see this on Christmas Eve when he springs her from federal prison. Who knows? The other thing in all of this, you mentioned the victims. I was talking to Liz Oyer, the former pardon attorney over the DOJ. She was fired inappropriately by the Justice Department because she wouldn't play ball with them. And she said, speaking of the victims, you're supposed to, standard operating procedure, this by the book, you're supposed to take into consideration the feelings, the thoughts, the statements of the victims before you do a pardon like this. And of course, Trump doesn't give a shit about any of that. But, I was talking to Vicky Ward, who's investigated this over the last couple of decades. And she has said, these women will go berserk. These women will go off and make a lot of noise for Donald Trump if he does this. And so getting back to your point about MAGA and being a little uncomfortable with this, I mean, can you imagine going into the midterm cycle with, the big, beautiful bill and all the political implications of that? And then in the middle of that sandwich is all of these just horrible, horrible stories that these women are telling after Ghislaine Maxwell is potentially freed from prison and then skips town and leaves the country. I mean, that is a dog's breakfast for Trump and the Republicans to run on next year.
I don't think you want to go into the midterms as a Republican having to answer the question in every debate and in every press avail. Oh, do you agree with the president freeing the woman who engineered the largest pedophile sex trafficking ring in modern history? And they're going to have to be wedged. Go, Stuart.
I just got to weigh in. This is about Trump, but it's really about the Republican Party. Because if the Republican Party it stood as a unified force and said, do not pardon Maxwell, release every bit of information that we have on Epstein, it would be very difficult for Trump to resist that. They are not powerless.
No.
And this is just such a sort of moral parable that's playing out. They think that by saying nothing, they somehow have reduced their complicity. Jim, let me ask you, I was listening to an interview with Julia Brown, who was the Miami Herald reporter, and she was being asked, why has it taken so long for this to become a media story such as it is? And she was saying, I think part of the problem is, and you would know far more about this than Rick or I, but that the powers that be in most of media in America are men. And, this is a story of powerful men. And the question is not that it would be intentional in the sense like we're going to have a meeting here and there's going to be some conspiracy, but it just struck me as very true that it's almost impossible for an adult male who is successful in the world, which you are if you're in some position, to really have any sense of what it would be like to be 14, 15 years old and have, a limo pull up with Ghislaine Maxwell in it.
Would you like to meet Prince Andrew of England?
Yeah. Well, and those girls were being lured from the other side of the tracks. I mean, there was a lot of that going on too.
Yeah.
The Netflix documentary on this is extraordinary and it paints that picture. But Stu, you're absolutely right. And I think part of the reason why the media ignored this, and I hate to use the term the media because, there are folks who did cover it and did a tremendous job with it, and Julie Brown and so on. I think that there are folks who kind of wrote it off because they thought this was a fixation of the far right. And because of those goofballs running wild really with it and saying, release the Epstein files and things like that, it sort of turned it into this cartoonish caricature. And I think, but that doesn't give us a pass. I think folks in the media should have been digging more, should have been asking these questions. My God, Trump has been through 3 elections and we're just finding out now that Jeffrey Epstein was stealing employees from his spa at Mar-a-Lago for a sex ring. Excuse me, what the hell is going on here? I mean, I thought I asked a lot of tough questions of Donald Trump back in the day, but this was something that should have been covered more vigorously. There's no question about it. And to your point about the Republican Party, I will say you're dead on, Stu, because can you imagine right now a Mitt Romney not going to the floor of the Senate and railing against the idea of pardoning Ghislaine Maxwell? Can you imagine a John McCain not going to the floor of the Senate and railing against? I mean, where are their spines?
I mean, you've got people in the Senate. If I'm not mistaken, Joni Ernst used to talk passionately about defending women from sexual assault, and
someone who
and Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, who somehow seem to swallow their anxiety every time a big vote comes up and vote for whatever Trump wants. I would settle for any of them. You've got people like Josh Hawley and Tom Cotton who say that the definition of masculinity is protecting women, which, I don't disagree with that. But they say that it's the definition of masculinity should be that you protect women in your life, in your family, in your society. And none of them are racing to the floor right now to say Donald Trump should release this so that we can learn how these networks worked, so we can hold people to account.
One of my favorite books is, and Stu and I talked about this the other day, is Profiles in Courage by John Kennedy. And can you imagine if you were a United States Senator on the Republican side and you went to the floor and you demanded that Donald Trump not give in and pardon Ghislaine Maxwell and release somebody from prison who's an absolute monster on your deathbed, as you're dying and taking in your last breath, you were able to say, I put everything on the line to stop something horrific from happening. And these guys aren't doing it. Maybe they will. I don't,
you got Mark Wayne Mullen last week, another tiny little Pinocchio. Mark Wayne Mullen last week saying, we're doing this to give Trump cover. He literally said the words on the Senate floor, we're doing this to give Trump cover, to delay and to leave town. It's such a moral vacuum.
We touched on this when we were talking about, and Rick and I have talked about it in sort of, over and over. There's just something that happened in the Republican Party.
Yep.
And, Rick and I spent years pointing out flaws in the Democratic Party. Fine, it's not perfect, but it still is a pro-democracy party. But there was something that happened in the Republican Party that rewarded weakness, that somehow created a space of self-selecting weak people to advance in the party. And here you are, and it's that sort of something that happened almost passively, but aggressively, they have driven all the strong people out of the party.
Yeah.
And that really, I think, is unparalleled. I mean, if this is
it's the Gresham's law of the Republican Party. Bad drives out good.
Yeah.
And
isn't it part of it that he's turned the party into a mob?
Yeah.
A kind of mob. And there's an enforcement racket that goes on.
You know what? Back in the beginning, in 2016, 17, I would talk to members of the House, a lot of whom I helped elect, members of the Senate, a lot of whom I knew and helped elect, and I would get that like, yeah, this will all pass. Don't worry about it. We'll get the base under control. It'll be fine. And sometime around 2019, it flipped hard into Trump's like, well, if we don't reelect him, the base will punish all of us. We'll all lose our seats. And then after 2021. Aside from that 5 minutes after January 6th, they became entirely his party. I mean, the ones we look at, the outliers, the Murkowskis, the Collinses, the Fitzgeralds occasionally in the House, they really still vote with Trump 99% of the time. And their justification is, I'm afraid of the base, either physically or politically, and it worked. What Trump did to them worked. He broke them. And you know, I want to go back to this for a second, because this really is the kind of damage that these people emotionally manipulate their victims with. And I look at Congress as like an abused relationship with Trump. But we also have a bunch of you look at this, the way that Epstein and Maxwell and these other wealthy people who I want to know who they are. I'd love to know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care who they are, what letter comes after their name.
Put it out there. Who cares? Right.
Yeah. But let's play a quick clip. We've got a clip of a bunch of the victims talking about Maxwell and Epstein.
I distinctly remember him smiling and enjoying the fact that he was doing this. He asked me to take my clothes off. I was trembling. I was so scared. He began to touch me. It quickly turned into an assault.
I was so young. Ghislaine woke me up in the morning and said, "You're going to meet a prince today." And Ghislaine said, "He's coming back to the house, and I want you to do for him what you do for Epstein."
Epstein walked out and said, "Oh, no. She's not here for you." And he said, "Come with me." And he escorted him into another office. And I was like, who's in there? And when he said, "Oh, I thought she was 16, I thought, is there a 16-year-old in there? There's hundreds of us that were preyed upon.
Jeffrey thought that we were disposable, and he threw us all away. And look who's still standing.
I just feel like as a country we owe, and look, it isn't just a right-wing obsession. There is human trafficking, there is sex trafficking in this country, there are pedophiles in this country, and it strikes me that as a citizen, people should want to see the truth of all this, because it might help us be better as a country in preventing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I do think this says something that's very damning about our society, because a lot of very smart, very powerful men who in other areas of their life did a lot of good things were pals with Jeffrey Epstein.
Sure.
And God knows what happened.
Leon Black, I mean, all major, business types.
But, I don't think there's anything like that exists outside of male powerful culture. This is not, where's a group of women that, did Margaret Thatcher do this? I mean, what, and there's something about it. And I think in a way it's positive in a sense. I think we've come a long way since Bill Clinton ran. And, the way that the Clinton campaign attacked those who came out and spoke about Clinton was reprehensible. And, I did a lot of things I regret in campaigns. You do things in campaigns because you want to win, but still it was reprehensible. And I think that the fact that Bill Clinton was part of this is absolutely no reason. To the degree that he was a part of it, we don't know, but he clearly was associates, friends with Epstein. That shouldn't matter. And I don't know anybody in the Democratic Party at this point that's saying, let's don't do this because we need to protect Bill Clinton.
No, I think it's pretty universal, right, Jim? I mean,
no, I mean, they're all saying release the Epstein files. And, I don't know, the conversation has shifted away from the Epstein files. Have you noticed that? I mean, that's the other thing that's happened too, is we're talking about, should he pardon Ghislaine Maxwell? There's still the matter of the files.
Right.
Kash Patel promised to release them. Pam Bondi said that they're sitting on my desk. Donald Trump's talked about it. J.D. Vance has talked.
Sure.
I mean, just about every major figure in the Republican Party has called for the release of the Epstein files. Where are those calls now? Those files should be released, and I don't see, Mike Johnson punting this until September, how this does him any good. Right now, people aren't paying attention. You know what I mean? They're at the beach, they're on vacation, and so on. And the fall
guy still has to pass a budget, guys.
That is a really smart point. I haven't really liked it.
Yeah, Johnson still has to pass a budget, and I can't imagine that the 15 or so Republicans who are in the Release the Epstein Files caucus are going to quietly say, "Okay, it's all forgotten now." When they come back in September.
Yeah. I mean, say what you will about Jeffrey Epstein. He shut down Congress, which isn't bad for a dead guy. I mean, that's some reach.
God, I do think there's a part of the paranoia about Trump's anger and rage. And I spoke to somebody over the weekend, very close to the Senate leadership, who said to me that the paranoia there, that everything could fly apart if he keeps acting so erratically, especially as the summer drags on. But they kept thinking the subject would change back, that he would get control of the whole narrative. But just changing it, I think, from the files to Ghislaine's pardon, it means that it's going to go back to the files, because whatever she says will now be a greater public demand. Okay, well, show us the evidence of this, Trump team. And I don't think they're never gonna get over Donald Trump's resistance to letting the material that he was indicated in out. And the greatest part of this is, with 1,000 FBI agents who went through all this material, that's 1,000 potential sources of a leak. It's astounding it's astounding how dumb that was by Bondi, but then it's not as astounding when you know Pam Bondi.
Right. Well, that's true. And who other than Sean Hannity is going to buy it? If Ghislaine Maxwell comes out and says, oh, Donald Trump, he didn't do anything wrong. I mean, she's a known liar. The prosecutor said as much during the trial. It's been adjudicated as such. And, I just don't see how this shuts up the base. I don't see how it shuts up that fringe element, that QAnon element of the MAGA base. If they're all sellouts if they give in. I mean, Joe Rogan the other day was saying this is a line in the sand.
Line in the sand. Mm-hmm.
Okay. We all remember what happened with Barack Obama when he didn't enforce his red line. Right. So Joe Rogan, you've said this is a line in the sand. If they try to whitewash this thing and cover it up and sweep it under the rug, it's on you, man, to hold this guy to account. And so these influencers waving the binders and all that shit, this is your moment.
Stand up. Be counted.
You know what?
Save the children, y'all.
Save them.
Guys, what just blows my mind about this is, when Trump ran for office, there were tons of pictures of him and Epstein.
Sure.
Epstein introduced him to his wife. They were all part of this, at the Kit Kat Club. Supposedly they had sex for the first time on his plane. I mean, this is who Trump is. The essence of Donald Trump.
Anybody who didn't think Donald Trump, and I actually had some people, this is way back in the 90s when I was doing I had a lot of high value, like these real estate developers in Miami and Palm Beach. They hired me for political shit. Even in the late 90s, it was like, yeah, Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. Do you know Jeffrey? He parties all the time. And I didn't ever put two and two together back then, because I thought, Donald Trump, who the fuck cares? But, this relationship was not a secret. And it does stun me that all of us, including, and as you said, Jim, you asked some of the toughest questions of Trump and his administration ever. And still, this thing is now front and center with the American people. And I think this is why the base is so freaked out also. This is the first time it's really coming home to them. Like, this guy's a degenerate. He's a bad guy.
It did come up from time to time. I mean, there are sound bites from the first administration where he's asked about Ghislaine Maxwell. Remember when she's sentenced and he says,
I wish her well.
I wish her well.
I wish her well.
Who wishes
he said that twice.
Well?
He did it once in a presser and once with Swan from Axios.
Right.
And he was like, I'd wish you well if you were going to prison. I wish you well. I mean, I don't know. I can make a list of them. I can make a list of them.
Ever wish well?
Wish well, and it's 0. So
I think it's interesting to sort of think about it. The media has the ability, and I think has in this case brought the facts out. What the media doesn't have the ability is to make a large portion of the country care.
Right.
You can't imbue values. You could reveal that there were Nazis in Churchill's cabinet, but if the conservatives are okay with it, what else are you going to do? And that's really the astounding thing here is there really is not a dispute over the facts that a guy who's president of the United States is on the record talking about what a good friend he was with Jeffrey Epstein, we know he went to parties with him. We know that Trump has this history of courting. I mean, the guy talked in public about dating his daughter. I mean,
or looking up the escalator and I'll date her in 10 years.
I know she's 10, but in 10 years, I'll be dating her.
This is we have the Access Hollywood tape. This is who Donald Trump is. And, the party that was so outraged by Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, go back and read Bennett's Book of Virtues, that all of this stuff that the White House and the Oval Office is more than executives. It embodies something about the values and the soul of the country. And now we're accepting this. And
it is a remarkable. I mean, it's depressing on one level, but it is remarkable to watch this playing out. And again, the scandal before and the long running damage to all these victims is now being exacerbated and made more tragic by this cover up. But we're going to keep covering it here, folks, on Lincoln Square. I want to thank Jim Acosta for coming on today. Jim, thank you. Folks, follow Jim's Substack. It is absolutely terrific. It is top notch. He's leading the charge in building this new journalism and this new media infrastructure that's